We're now into playoff season, and with Super Rugby, Premiership Rugby and URC all into the knockout stages, it's time to take a look ahead to this weekend's action to see who's going to be bringing in the fantasy points. But first up, a quick recap of last week's action, kicking off with Super Rugby. Now, last week was the final week of the official game. With the regular season over, the official game is done and dusted. So let's take a quick look at my team and then look at the overall Fantasy Rugby Geek leaderboard to see who took home the winnings. Okay, looking at my team, the final round was a bit of a disappointment for me. I did have Damian McKenzie as my captain. Ever reliable, 40 points. He got 80 after the captain bonus. I also had good performances from Mark Talea on 58 points, Ardy Surveyor on 57 points, Corey Evans on 38, Roy Gard on 35, and Satutu on 32, and Riccatelli on 54 points. But that was about it. Elsewhere, Antonio Waka, very disappointing, 7 points. Nick Frost, 16. Angus Bell, only 18 points. Balin Sullivan, only 15 points. Really poor final week, and that pushed me down my rankings. So speaking of rankings, let's take a look at the Fantasy Rugby Geek League to see how my team ended up and who led the way. And it's a huge congratulations to Cal7, first overall in the Fantasy Rugby Geek League and first of all worldwide with a huge 10,069 points. Right behind him and friend of Fantasy Rugby Geek, Column Talks Rugby, ended up so close, 10,055 points. Cal and Column were the only two players in the entire game to get over 10,000 points, a huge achievement from both of them. Third place in the FRG League was Speed Mode, then we got Laker Luca, Jack Sully 10, Reese's Peace, Aidan Collins Rugby on 7th place, a load of flankers in 8th. 9th place was Tidsy, and I just made it into my own league's top 10 with 9,494 points. In all, it was a great experience on the official game, first season of the game. Definitely a few things they need to sort out for next season. Most importantly, I would say, including a bench, there's quite a few late dropouts in matches in Super Rugby this season, as there always is. If you've got a bench lined up, then at least you have someone coming in if one of your players gets ruled out. Likewise, I'd like to see price changes. The prices remain fixed since the start of the season. So you have players like Leroy Carter or Carlo Tirzano, who prices stayed very low throughout the course of the game. You would have liked to see top performers increase their prices so that budget became an issue. In the end, budget was really never an issue for me, and I never even got around to playing the limitless chip because I didn't have a single week where I had budget issues. But the organisers of the Super Rugby game are really keen for feedback on how to improve their game next year. And they've just released a survey to all users of the game for this year to get feedback on the game and improve the game for next year. So make sure you sign up to that. It takes about 5 minutes to fill it out. There's a link in my description where you can sign up to that survey. Also keep an eye out for a new game, exactly based on the same format as the Super Rugby game for the Rugby Championship. That'll be going live later this summer after the Lions tour. Well worth checking out. I really enjoyed the format and I think it will work well for the Rugby Championship. So make sure you check that out. Okay, going back to last week and looking at some of my other teams. So first of all, Superbru on Super Rugby. All in all, I had a good week on Superbru actually. All three of my teams got over 200 points, which I would say is the benchmark for a good week. On Super Rugby, it was 207 points. Mark Talea was my captain. He got 45 points, so that was absolutely awesome. Damian McKenzie got me 20 points at fly half. Sevu Reese, decent enough, 16.5 points. And Ricky Riccatelli with 16 points. And as always, Ardy Surveyor scored well with 15 points. So all in all, it was a good week for me on Super Rugby. On Superbru, happy to keep that going for the next round. On to Fantasy Rugby Draft, and as I mentioned last week, I was in the Sacco final of the FRTV Legends League. Happy to say that I was able to be successful in the final. I had no late dropouts this week like I did in both weeks of the semi-finals, and so I was able to secure victory over my old friend Corbus Hatting. In the end, I got 342 points. Corbus got 312 points. Top performers, Mark Talea, Lackey Anderson with an amazing try scoring performance. 4 tries he got for the Reds. Duplessis Karifi did very well for me with 33.6 points. So all in all, I was really pleased. It's been a tough season on Fantasy Rugby Draft for me. But I'm just glad that I escaped at the very final hurdle. Okay, on to Premiership Rugby, and it was a great week for me with 244 points on Superbru. Top performers, Gabby Ibitoy, 30 points, Christian Wade, 35.5 points, Calaveti Ravalval, 27.5 points, Seb Atkinson, 19 points, Hamro Liebenberg, 20 points. So some great scores there. A great result last week. It's into the semis this week. Let's see if I can keep that momentum going. And then finally onto URC, another good week for me, 201 points in total. Top performances from my captain, James Lowe. He got 43 points after the captain bonus. Sam Prendergast as well, 23 points. Keegan Johannes was my backup kicker, so he didn't get any kicking points, but he still got me 15.5 points. And then Cameron Hanacom with a massive 23 points. A great show all round and a great final score, despite the fact that Suleiman Hartzenberg got me -2 points. So onwards to next week. Okay, on to this week, and we have the qualifying round of Super Rugby, and we also have the semi-finals, Premiership Rugby and URC. Kicking off with Super Rugby, and this week we have the slightly confusing qualifying round. It's not the quarterfinals, it's the qualifying round. So 3 matches, all the winners qualify for the semi-finals, and the highest ranked losing team also qualifies for the semis, I think. In any case, we've got the Crusaders versus the Reds, a massive game between the Chiefs and the Blues, and the Brumbies versus the Hurricanes. As always in the knockouts, the matches are getting tighter and closer, but I'm looking towards the Crusaders to be the biggest win this week. In terms of the 5 players that I've got my eye on this week, kicking off with Cam Roygaard. As long as the Canes are still in the competition, I'll be selecting Cam Roygaard in my team. 4 tries in his last 3 games. He's absolutely unstoppable. Then we've got Will Jordan, back after the injury, which has kept him out since round 13. Prior to his injury, he was in top form. I expect him to make an immediate impact against the Reds. Then we've got Sevu Reece, similar story, and always consistent attacking danger. It's hard to look past Reece as a good back 3 option this week. I've gone for Rivez Rehana as well, a bit of a differential, as most will probably go with DMAC, but Rehana was outstanding in round 16 with a try, 64 metres carried, 2 line breaks and 6 defenders beaten. And with a good-looking matchup, he could be a good calculated gamble. And then finally, Leroy Carter, one of the players of the season and just so consistent. If the Chiefs are going to overcome the Blues this weekend, then Carter will definitely be in the mix. Over to the Premiership, and in the 2 semis this week, we've got Bath versus Bristol on Friday night, and then Leicester versus Sale on Saturday afternoon. 2 close matches, but Bath are well rested, having put out a second string recently. So they're probably strong favourites in what should be a really open and free-flowing attacking festival, while Leicester versus Sale is a bit close to call and should be a much tighter affair. Looking at my big 5 this week, considering that Bath versus Bristol will be more of an open game conducive to fantasy points, this is where I've been focusing. So kicking off with Will Muir, he's had an injury hit second half of the season, but when he was fit, he put in some huge performances, including 45.5 fantasy points against Sarries in round 9, and 32 fantasy points against Quins in round 13. The stage could be set again for him to go big again. Then we've got Gabriel Ibitoy, another mega performance from him in round 18. He may be playing for the underdogs in the semis, but he simply makes things happen. Ignore him as a fantasy option at your own risk. Joe Kokonasiga, again, another focal point of the Bath attack. His last 2 league appearances for Bath have reaped some massive fantasy points, so it's time to lock him into your team. Then we've got Finn Russell. He's the top scoring fly half in Superbru by some distance. He's good for his kicking points, as we all know, but his all-round game also generates plenty of high fantasy scores. He's an easy pick for the semis. And then finally, Calaveti Ravalval. He's out of position again, a centre playing on the wing. His scores recently on Superbru have been insane. A must pick, easily the best fantasy option in the centres this week. Finally, onto the URC and the semi-finals this weekend, featuring Leinster versus Glasgow and the Bulls versus the Sharks. Personally, I'm finding it hard to look past both Leinster and the Bulls to secure big home victories this week, so this is where I'm focusing the majority of my fantasy picks. So my big 5 this week, kicking off with Dan Sheehan. He was on the bench last week. He should hopefully get a start this weekend. He's an ever reliable try threat. Then we've got James Lowe. He's hitting form at the right time. Another try in Leinster's quarter-final win over the Scarlets. He remains a huge danger when he's on song, and he's one of the safest back three picks in the game this week. Cameron Hanekom, he was the Bulls' highest scoring forward in last week's quarterfinals. He's uber consistent and should go well again in the semis. Geordie Barrett, a quiet match by his standards in the quarterfinals, but he should be back to his best for the semi-finals. And then finally, Sam Prendergast, he scored well in the quarters, largely courtesy of his kicking. His boot's going to be key in the semis. So again, he's a safe selection option in the fly half position. That's it for this week. Check out fantasyrugbygeek.com, where my qualifying round picks for Super Rugby are now live, and my URC and Premiership rugby picks will be going live tomorrow. That's it. As always, make sure you get your teams in, and good luck.